When a narcissist tries to destroy you, what they truly reveal is not your weakness, but the psychological abyss they themselves are living in. According to Carl Jung, every act of manipulation, deceit, or control from a narcissist stems from the shadow, the part of the soul that is buried, denied, and never confronted within themselves. Jung believed that if a person refuses to face their own shadow, they will project it onto others, turning you into the target, making you the mirror of the pain they dare not face. But you are not alone in this battle, because there is one beyond both psychology and time who is already moving, even in the moments you feel like you're falling apart. And today, we're going to uncover 5 ways God silently intervenes when a narcissist tries to destroy you, illuminated through both spiritual wisdom and the depth psychology of Carl Jung. Stay with us until the end of this video, because by the final moments, you'll come to see what was once broken in you is being used by God to build something unshakable. When a narcissist targets you, their goal isn't just to hurt you, it's to rewrite your reality. In Carl Jung's psychology, narcissistic behavior isn't merely excessive self-love. It's the result of a fragile ego, too weak to face the shadow within. So instead of self-reflection, they project that entire shadow onto you, turning you into the one to blame, the one to control, the one to silence. You're not just wounded by words or actions, you're eroded from within. Your sense of self begins to crack. You start doubting your intuition, your values, and your inner voice. Jung calls this the process of ego disintegration from the true self, a spiritually dangerous state. But it's precisely in that dark space where you feel abandoned and hopeless that God begins to move. 1. You think you're falling apart, but in truth you're being rebuilt from within. That's what you can't see in the middle of the storm. When a narcissist starts manipulating you, you don't realize it immediately. They don't come with blatant cruelty, they come with charm, subtlety, and intelligence. They praise you strategically. They make you feel special, like they understand you better than anyone ever has. And then they start distorting reality, not with overt lies, but with 1,000 tiny shifts that make you question yourself. You start wondering, am I overreacting? Maybe I'm too sensitive. And 4. Surely they didn't mean it like that. That's when the real battle begins, not out there, but in your own mind. Because the narcissist's most powerful weapon isn't their words, it's their distortion of the truth. They manipulate you into questioning your own intuition, your memories, your emotions. Carl Jung called this projection when a person refuses to face the darkness within. They unconsciously project it onto others. They blame, manipulate, and seek to control others as a way to avoid the war raging inside them. The narcissist lives in the illusion that they are central, right, the victim, and you are forced to carry the shadow they refuse to acknowledge. And you, once clear-minded, strong, loving, and trusting, now feel like you're unraveling from the inside. But what you don't realize is that something sacred is happening in the midst of that unraveling. You think God has left you. You feel abandoned. But the truth is, He is moving. Not through immediate rescue, but by allowing the storm to expose what must be revealed. Sometimes God doesn't stop the battle. He steps into it with you and uses it as a tool for refinement. He doesn't leave you in the dark. He leaves you there just long enough so you can see what the light has never been able to show you. In Jungian depth psychology, this stage is called confrontation with the shadow, the moment you can no longer run. You start to see yourself clearly. You see them clearly. You see the full truth, painful, but freeing. In the Bible, this happens again and again. Pharaoh hardened his heart and oppressed Israel through power until God Himself exposed His truth. King Saul manipulated, lied, and grew jealous, trying to destroy David, but he was ultimately undone by the conflict in his own soul. God does not merely protect, He exposes. And that is what He's doing in your life. Piece by piece, the false reality begins to crumble. A friend starts to ask questions. A story stops making sense. A small but sharp truth slices through the mask. And slowly, the picture the narcissist painted, where they're the victim and you're just too sensitive, begins to fall apart. God doesn't need to shout to move. He arranges everything quietly, in divine order, because truth doesn't need to be defended with force. It only needs time and light. And then something miraculous happens. You begin to see yourself again. You start to remember, this is who I was before I was made to doubt myself by that person. Help, you begin to realize, I'm not crazy, I was manipulated. You start to stand up straighter, not because the pain is gone, but because the truth has arrived. This is the restoration of identity, not from another person, but from the one who created you. God doesn't just rescue you from the lie, He restores the identity you lost. And that restoration doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens in the quiet where you feel peace despite the silence, awareness despite the pain, trembling but still moving forward. And one day you'll look back and realize, I wasn't destroyed. I was reborn, too. You think you're lost in loneliness, but in truth, you've been chosen for a sacred journey, one that no one else can walk for you. One of the most ruthless tactics of a narcissist isn't yelling. It's not direct insults. It's the subtle isolation so covert that you can no longer tell the difference between truth and deception. At first, they plant seemingly harmless seeds. Are you sure that friend is truly genuine with you? I don't think your family understands you the way I do. It feels like I'm the only one who really accepts you. And without realizing it, the connections around you begin to quietly unravel, like bricks being pulled one by one from the foundation of your home. One day you wake up and realize you've become dependent on the very person who is manipulating you. Worse, you feel ashamed for it. This is the moment when the identity crisis begins. Carl Jung once said, loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself. And truly, the narcissist doesn't just isolate you from the world, they isolate you from your own soul. You no longer trust your emotions. You doubt your intuition, your reasoning, your memories. You begin apologizing for things you didn't even do wrong. You start shrinking yourself, afraid of upsetting them. You go silent, because you no longer know which voice inside you is truly yours. And then everything grows quiet. The phone stops ringing, no one checks in. Your family grows distant. Not because you changed, but because the narcissist has crafted a narrative about you, skillfully manipulating how others see you. You stand there in the rubble of your relationships and wonder, do I deserve this? Am I the problem? Maybe. I really am a terrible person. And that's when God begins His work. No loud entrance, no dramatic rescue, no force or pressure, just a quiet, undeniable presence. Because in that isolation, in that spiritual desert, God is not absent. He is refining you. Jung called this moment the dark night of the soul, where every illusion is stripped away, every ego burned down, and only the self remains the sacred essence within you, crafted by God Himself. In the silence you begin to hear, not the voice of the one who manipulated you, not the scorn of those who believed lies, but the gentle whisper of God, calling you home. He says, I'm still here. I never forgot you. You are not worthless. You are not crazy. You are being reborn. Oh no. You thought the silence was punishment, but it's the birthing room of your soul. In the absence of fake comfort, you learn to soothe yourself with truth. Where every gaze is turned away, you learn to look at yourself with compassion. Where no one believes you, you start believing in God and in yourself again. You face what you once avoided. You see the childhood fear of abandonment. You realize how often you traded peace for acceptance. You learn that real love doesn't make you feel small, it makes you feel free. And from that very place of pain, a seed of truth begins to grow. You no longer need to explain everything. You no longer have to prove your worth. You're no longer afraid of silence, no longer afraid of being misunderstood, because you've seen the light, not the external light, but the light of a restored soul. You once thought you were losing yourself, but the truth is, You were being separated from the manipulated version of you so you could return to your true self. God didn't lead you into isolation to make you suffer. He brought you there to bury the false self you were forced to become and to resurrect the true self He designed. Carl Jung once wrote, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens. No one who avoids their personal hell will ever discover their inner heaven." You've walked through hell, but you didn't die. You were forgotten, but God never forgot you. You thought it was the end, but it was the beginning of a new you. A you who knows exactly who you are. A you who no longer seeks validation from the outside. A you who can't be broken by lies anymore. And when you walk out of that wilderness, you are no longer a victim. You are living proof that you can be crushed and still bloom. 3. Not every collapse is a tragedy. Some collapses are sacred, deliberate, and inevitable, orchestrated by truth itself. When you've been the victim of a narcissist, you know that truth doesn't disappear, it just gets distorted. What you feel, what you see, what you suspect, what you intuitively know, all of it is denied by skillful manipulation and a chilling counterfeit confidence. The narcissist doesn't lie to cover up something, they lie to rewrite reality. And the most dangerous part is, they do it with charm, with grace, and often with a mask of moral righteousness. They don't just want you to believe them, they want you to stop believing yourself. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And it is in that darkness where the narcissist dwells. They mask their inner emptiness by controlling others. They're not seeking truth, they're fleeing from it. So when you begin to awaken, when light starts seeping into the room they've locked with ambiguous words and contradictory actions, you become the threat. And then the inevitable begins. Truth starts to leak out, not through dramatic scandals, not through public explosions, but through small yet piercing fractures. A story that no longer adds up. Someone they once manipulated begins to speak out. A person sees what you've seen all along. This is not revenge. This is revelation. In the Bible, God does not only protect the oppressed, He exposes the lie. Pharaoh once believed himself a god. King Saul once believed himself righteous. But at the appointed time, truth was revealed and power was transferred. God's exposure doesn't come with the noise we expect. He doesn't need fireworks to do what's right. He moves with holy precision. And when He removes His covering hand from the manipulator, the mask begins to fall. The lies that once convinced the crowd now feel hollow. The defender starts stepping back. The admiring eyes turn into questioning glances. And the thing that hurts the narcissist the most isn't being accused, it's being forgotten. They're not afraid of losing you. They're afraid you no longer need them to define yourself. Carl Jung once said, "There is nothing more terrifying than having someone see the part of you that you haven't had the courage to face yourself." And that is exactly what's happening. When you rise, no longer afraid, no longer silent, no longer panicked, you become the mirror that reflects back the lies they've spent their whole life trying to hide. God doesn't just tear down falsehood, He rebuilds you. When truth is revealed, you reclaim your voice. When the mask falls, the light returns to your eyes. When the manipulator no longer controls the story, you begin to write your own with clarity, integrity, and courage. No one may apologize. Those who doubted you may never return to admit they were wrong. But you don't need that to heal. Because when you're rebuilt by truth itself, you no longer need external validation to exist. Truth, once exposed by the hand of God, can never be caged again. It doesn't need spectacle. It doesn't need popularity. It only needs a soul willing to live authentically, and a God who never lets lies reign forever. And that is you. You are the living proof that you can be torn down and still be restored. You can be silenced and still become the voice of truth. You can be seen as weak and still stand unshaken in a light that cannot be dimmed. Truth doesn't need to scream to win. It only needs to be lived through your life. 4. While they were trying to erase you from the map of life, God was redrawing your soul with the pen of truth. A narcissist doesn't just want to hurt you. They want to remake you, but in their image. A version that's easy to control, easy to manipulate, and easy to silence. They cannot tolerate you being fully yourself. They can't stand your voice, your boundaries, or your self-worth. To them, you're not a person. You're a mirror they use to inflate their hollow sense of self. So the attack doesn't just come through words or actions. It comes through a quiet, brutal redefinition. They make you question your own emotions. They convince you that every reaction you have is too sensitive. They plant guilt every time you set a boundary. They make you feel, if I were a good person, I'd just endure a little more. And piece by piece, you start to disappear. Carl Jung called this alienation from the true self, when a person is pulled so far away from who they are that they begin to live through the gaze, expectations, and shaping of someone else. Jung believed this was more dangerous than physical harm, because when a person disconnects from their authentic self, they begin to live like a shadow, always seeking external approval, yet never feeling whole from within. But what the narcissist can never understand is this: the human soul is not easily erased. They may suppress you, but they can't extinguish the light God placed inside you. And while they are distorting you from the outside, God begins rebuilding you from the inside. No noise, no rush, but a fire that cannot be put out. This is the miracle of divine healing. God doesn't always remove the pain immediately. Instead, He transforms that very pain into the soil that nourishes a new identity. When you feel like you're losing everything, love, trust, connection, He begins pouring truth into the most distorted places. He says, you are not crazy. You are not weak. You are not too much. You are simply learning how to return to yourself. Oh, and little by little, you begin to rise again. At first, you start questioning the things they said about you. Then you recall the moments before they entered your life when you were confident, joyful, and full of belief in good things. And then you ask yourself, if I used to be that person, could I become them again? God's answer is, no, you won't be that person again. You'll be a deeper, stronger, more authentic version. This is the phase where God reestablishes your identity, not rooted in trauma, but in truth. And truth doesn't arrive through shouting. It arrives with steady strength, one step at a time. You begin to reject words that make you feel small. You stop explaining yourself to people who never cared to understand. You embrace silence and realize it no longer scares you. This is not bitterness. This is power. Because when you stop chasing approval, you begin reclaiming your wholeness. Carl Jung once said, the person with true inner strength is the one who can live without the approval of others. And that's exactly what's awakening in you. Not because you no longer need love, but because you no longer compromise yourself just to keep someone from leaving. You are stepping into a soul reformation, where the truth of who you are in God's eyes becomes louder than any lie ever spoken about you. And then one day you'll stand in front of the mirror, not crying over what you lost, but smiling because you've reclaimed what matters most. Yourself. Not the version made to be loved. Not the version made to be forgiven. Not the version molded to please others. But you designed by God, healed by grace, and restored by truth. 5. You thought you were being buried, but in truth, you were being planted. After walking through the hell of manipulation, after enduring isolation, exposure, and the restoration of your identity, you reach another stage. The stage where God begins to lift you up, not for revenge, not to put your abuser to shame, but to establish you in a way that no one can deny. Carl Jung once said, man does not find light by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And you have walked through the darkness. No one knows the storm you've survived. No one saw the tears you buried. No one heard the cry of your soul on those nights when it was just you, God, and loneliness. And now, just when you think everything is in ruins, God begins to rebuild you, not as you were, but as He intended all along. Elevation doesn't always look the way you expect. It doesn't always come with applause. It's not always public recognition. It's not a headline. Sometimes it's simply the peace that follows years of chaos. It's the moment you wake up and realize you no longer panic when you see a message from the past. You no longer tremble at the mention of their name. You no longer dream manipulated dreams. You are no longer defined by pain. You have moved beyond it. In the Bible, when Joseph was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and falsely imprisoned, it looked like the end. But it was precisely in the lowest place that God laid the foundation to raise him to the highest. And when Joseph was finally given authority, he didn't use it for revenge. He spoke words that echo through eternity. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. Genesis 50-20. And the same is true for you. The narcissist may have tried to tear you down, erase you, make you feel small. They believed your collapse would be permanent. But what they didn't know is that you weren't falling. You were bending to rise stronger. God's elevation is not based on performance, but on character. The world sees achievements. God sees integrity forged through pain. When you chose forgiveness over vengeance, when you held on to your values rather than compromise for love, when you waited in silence instead of screaming to be vindicated, he remembered you. Carl Jung once noted, "Only the deeply wounded can see and heal the wounds of others." And that's why your healing is not just for you. God doesn't heal you to keep you hidden. He heals you to make you a light for those still lost in the dark. You begin to share your story. You now recognize narcissistic behaviors before they turn into abuse. You comfort others who've been where you've been, not with preaching, but with deep understanding. You help people distinguish between real love and manipulation disguised as love. And then people begin to see you differently, not as the quiet one, not the one who always forgives too easily, not the one who shrinks back to keep the peace, but as a calm, commanding presence, defined by no one but the one who created you. That's when God completes the reconstruction of your soul. No need for public retaliation, no need to reveal every painful detail, because the way you live now is proof enough you have been rescued. And the narcissist, they may still be spinning a new story, still trying to convince others that you are crazy, bitter, or delusional. But the truth is, they have lost the one thing they can't fabricate through control your light. Carl Jung once warned, whoever does not confront their own shadow will be consumed by it. And as your light expands, their shadow has nowhere left to hide. This is not revenge. This is not victory in human terms. This is God fulfilling his promise that the humble will be lifted up. You weren't raised to dominate, but to serve with mercy. You weren't restored to retaliate, but to become living proof of divine justice. Your restoration isn't just a personal triumph. It's a message. No one gets to rewrite your destiny, except the one who wrote your name on the palm of his hand. They thought they ended you, but right at the place that looked like the final period, God began a new chapter. If you've ever been manipulated, silenced, or felt yourself slowly disappearing in a toxic relationship, please remember this. You were not abandoned. You are being rescued one step at a time, not through loud battles, not through dramatic confrontations, but through the quiet light that never goes out within you. The light God himself breathed into you when he formed you. The narcissist may have made you lose your sense of direction. They may have crafted a false reality where you were too sensitive. You were the problem. You were the burden. But that was never you. That was the projection of the darkness they refused to face within themselves. Carl Jung once wrote, "What is rejected in the self appears in the world as destiny." And the narcissist's destiny is to face the truth they've spent a lifetime avoiding. But your destiny is freedom. Freedom from control. Freedom from lies. Freedom from the belief that you must be good enough to be loved. You were never meant to be remade in someone else's image. You are being restored in the image of the one who created you. This truth doesn't arrive easily. It comes after nights of silent tears, after moments of deep self-doubt, after surrendering the need to be understood in order to choose yourself. And if you're in the middle of that journey now, please know, you are not alone. There are thousands walking through the ashes of their pain, learning once again how to hear their inner voice, waiting for the confirmation that they're not crazy, they were manipulated. If you see yourself in these words, if your heart is nodding in quiet agreement, then stay connected to this channel. Hit subscribe so you don't miss any message of healing, clarity, and truth. Because here, we don't sugarcoat the pain, but we also don't let it define you. Here, we believe, pain is a doorway and truth is the key. You have not been destroyed. You are being rebuilt, more beautiful, more powerful, and brighter than ever before.